Experience the captivating story of Eike Batista, the self-made billionaire whose empire collapsed just as quickly as it rose. From rags to riches and back again, Eike's story is one of ambition, success, and ultimately downfall. Join us as we take an in-depth look at the life and legacy of Eike Batista, the ultimate rise and fall story. Hello everyone, welcome to Money Mindfuck. Although before we start, if you appreciate the content and all the research that went into this video, it would help out this channel a lot if you hit the like button. If you are new to this channel, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to get more videos just like this. Now, without further ado, let's get started. With a net worth of $35 billion in late 2012, Eike Batista was one of the world's richest people. Eike was the owner of a mining, trading, and production conglomerate, and he hoped to reach the 100 billion mark by the end of the decade. He even imagined himself to be the world's richest person. However, a sudden turn of events would reduce his net worth to $1.2 billion in just over a year. The early years of Eike Batista? Now, examining the past, Eike Batista was born on November 3, 1956, in the governorate of Orviladaria, Brazil. His father, Eike Batista, was a native Brazilian businessman who served as mining and energy minister. Meanwhile, Eike's mother was from Germany, and she was raising Eike and his 6 siblings. Eike spent most of his childhood in Brazil, but his family moved to Europe when he was a teenager due to his father's work. While in Europe, the family lived in Geneva, Düsseldorf, and Brussels. When Eike turned 18, his family moved back to Brazil, but Eike decided to stay behind and attend a European university. Eike enrolled in the University of Aachen in Germany in 1974 to study metallurgical engineering. It doesn't appear that I paid for his education, at least not entirely, because Eike had to sell insurance policies door to door to support himself in Germany, according to his father. Eike later revealed that the stress of making a living selling insurance was one of the most valuable parts of his academic career. Anyway, in the early 1980s, Eike returned to Brazil and focused on the mining and trading industries. Eike Batista first steps as an entrepreneur. At the age of 23, he founded a gold trading company called Aurum Atrum. He wasn't doing anything revolutionary. He was simply buying gold from producers in the Amazon and selling it to buyers in European and Brazilian cities. Despite the simplicity of the endeavor, it was extremely successful. The company earned $6 million in the first 18 months of operations. Further expansion in the resource industry. A few years later, Eike expanded his mining operations internationally with the establishment of TVX Gold, which was based in Canada. Shortly after, Eike took the company public on the Montreal Stock Exchange, which he later regretted. Meanwhile, things were going well, and by the end of the century, the EBX Group was operating 8 gold mines in Brazil, Canada, and Chile, with a total production value of $20 billion. In 2001, Eike founded MPX, a power generation company based in Rio de Janeiro. A few years later, in 2005, he founded MMX, which focused on mining and trading iron ore in Brazil and Chile. In 2007, Eike founded LLX, which focused on providing logistics to Eike's other companies. Eike Batista's ambition to become an O&G major. However, OGX was his most ambitious and daring venture. In 2007, Eike began searching Brazil and eventually landed on an oil reserve with $1 trillion worth of deposits. To put this in context, Saudi Arabia's natural resources total $34.4 trillion, so Eike wasn't going to dethrone the real oil giants anytime soon, but $1 trillion worth of deposits was still a massive discovery. In June 2008, Eike took the company public, raising a record $4.3 billion, and this is what pushed him over the edge to billionaire status. You may have noticed that all of his businesses end with the letter X. As his companies grew in the late 2000s and early 2010s, Eike believed that the X simplified multiplication and exponential growth, and that the naming scheme was fairly accurate. Extreme Brazilian pride. Because of his extreme Brazilian pride, much of Brazil and the media adore Eike. Eike was convinced that Brazil was on the verge of an economic boom and that it was his responsibility to lead the country to the next level. He wasn't a saint or anything, but he did everything he could to earn positive press in Brazil. Eike, for example, was instrumental in Rio de Janeiro winning the bid for the 2016 Olympic Games in 2009. Aside from his strong Brazilian pride, Eike had a lot of pride in himself. He thought he was going to be the world's richest man by 2020 with a net worth of $100 billion, and given that he was worth $35 billion and the 7th richest person in the world, this was a pretty realistic goal for him. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The first cracks in Eike Batista's imperium. The company MMX violated numerous environmental regulations and was fined several times. In 2008, MMX was also accused of bribing and coercing a native Indian group in Ireland. That same year, Brazilian police raided Eike's homes and offices in an attempt to find evidence of gold smuggling and tax evasion, but they were unable to find any evidence, so while Eike had some red flags here and there, they weren't too concerning. The downfall of Eike Batista. Unfortunately, there wasn't much time left when the major red flags came up in late 2012. Within a few months, gold dropped from $1,800 to $1,200 per ounce. This was the first time that gold had crashed during Eike's career. Gold had a similar run-up and crash in the late 1970s during the inflation crisis, but since Eike started mining and trading in the early 1980s, gold had more or less just gone sideways or up. Meanwhile, silver got crushed even harder between 2011 and 2013. Silver prices plummeted from $1,500 per kilogram to $650 per kilogram, and silver still hasn't recovered. It is agreed that once the selling began, computer algorithms begin dumping positions, and this works in sell-offs, but we don't know what triggered the initial sell-off. There is speculation that big banks triggered the sell-offs to accumulate at lower prices, but this has not been confirmed. Whatever the reason, Eike's companies felt the pain of this flash crash immediately, with his mining and trading companies losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Another major setback. If this was the only issue, Eike could have handled it. However, Eike was about to suffer another major setback with his oil company, OGX. Eike had promised that his oil company would pump 750,000 barrels per day, but there had been a massive problem since founding the company. Brazil had chosen to nationalize oil production, which meant that Eike no longer had the access to the 1 trillion barrel oil deposit he discovered. Eike was hopeful that he could still make OGX work by drilling for oil in parts of Brazil where it was still legal, but at the end of the day, OGX could only pump 15,000 barrels per day, far short of the promised 750,000. Eike claims that if he had kept his companies private and relied on private investors, they would not have dumped their positions as aggressively. And while this is likely true, private investors would have not bid up his companies so much in the first place, so Eike might have had less cash to run his companies if he had chosen a private route. Eike began selling off his assets to try to keep the company running. Only 12 days later, OSX would declare bankruptcy. Eike's massive conglomerate of companies had shrunk to just MMX and MPX at this point, and his liabilities far outweighed his assets, giving him a net worth of minus $1.2 billion. MMX and MPX survived for the time being. They would also perish in the coming years. MPX declared bankruptcy in December 2014, and MMX followed suit in November 2016. With this money and influence gone, Eike's financial success was gone, but he would soon lose his freedom as well. From billionaire to inmate. In January 2017, Brazilian regulators decided to crack down on Eike, and he was arrested and imprisoned for money laundering and bribery. Can you believe that just 7 years ago, Eike was the world's 7th richest person, but now he's in jail? Eike was sentenced to 30 years in prison for laundering $100 million and bribing the former governor of Rio de Janeiro with $16.6 million to secure a government contract for his company. On top of that, he was convicted for insider trading. Eike did not spend 30 years in prison, though his lawyers planned to appeal the verdict and work out a plea deal. In March 2020, Eike agreed to pay $160 million and release everyone involved in money laundering and insider trading schemes. Most people would just stay out of the public eye and live the rest of their lives under the radar at this point, but this is not the case with Eike Batista. In October 2020, Eike announced that he was going to restart MMX and get back into the mining business. He claims that he is going to pay off all of his debts and rise to the top once more. Eike's unbreakable spirit is something to admire, but we'll have to wait and see how well a second attempt at entrepreneurship goes. At the end of the day, Eike had a massive empire on his hands, but it appears that he bit off more than he could chew, and as soon as the market and policies turned against him, his empire crumbled. Hopefully, he doesn't make the same mistake again. Do you believe Eike will make a comeback and return to $35 billion? Please leave a comment in the section below. With that being said, that's all for today. Thank you for spending some time with us. If you found this video interesting, make sure to hit the like button and the notification bell, and subscribe to our channel to get access to more interesting videos from us. Till next time.